The Pantheon of the Dragon Ball universe. The Dragon Ball Super manga has done a great job expanding the universe and showing how it's all organized. But did you know that Dragon Ball has its own pantheon? Let's dive into it. A pantheon is commonly known as the full organization of gods within a given mythology. For example, the Greek pantheon is organized into mortals, heroes, gods, and titans, and each one of those categories has a specific role to play in that story. Dragon Ball may not be something we'd call a mythology, but even so, this universe has its own pantheon. The world of Dragon Ball has its own realms, its own heroes, and of course, its own gods. Today, we're going to explore how the Dragon Ball universe is organized within its own pantheon and its own cosmology. But before that, I need your like to help this project grow. Subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon so you don't miss any new content. All right, now let's get to the topic. First, I want to make something very clear. Just to make things easier, I'm going to do what Goku Black did and call everyone who's not a god human. That's right, it'll make it simpler for you to follow along. So stop being annoying and saying things like, "But Saiyans aren't humans," because yes, they are. The philosophical meaning of human is different from the biological one, and everything that applies philosophically to a Saiyan also applies to a human. That said, let's begin. Like almost every fictional universe, there's a physical world and a spiritual world, and both contain souls. Souls that are authorized to enter the physical world need to take on a form. In other words, they must become human, which in this case means being born as a living being, the god in charge of deciding both the body that soul will inhabit and the place where that soul will reincarnate is Enma. He takes the form of a giant demon, and he can never leave his temple. He's also responsible for organizing the spiritual world, making sure each soul goes exactly where it deserves. If a soul behaved well while in a body, its destination is paradise, where it remains until it is eventually authorized to reincarnate. But if that soul did evil to the point of committing terrible crimes and like murder, then its destination is hell. There, it will be trapped and tortured with colorful animals singing annoying songs until all the evil is washed away, just like what happened to Frieza. After that cleansing, the soul is finally ready to be used by a new body. But souls that served humanity as true heroes can keep both their bodies and memories even after death. And sometimes, they even get special permission to return to their planet for a limited time, as we saw with Goku during the Majin Buu saga. So, all right, we know that Enma is the one who authorizes souls to reincarnate into human bodies. But having humans is pointless. If there's no place for them to live, that means planets with flora and fauna where they can develop. And that's where another extremely important deity comes in, the Kaioshins. In terms of hierarchy, Kaioshins stand above all other gods within a single universe. They're the ones who set the rules. It's as if they're planting little seeds, hoping that humanity will one day reap the fruits. No wonder that, during the Majin Buu saga, Piccolo himself referred to the Kaioshin as the supreme god of the universe. This proves something important. Divinity isn't necessarily about power, it's about role and position. Every god has a job, and that's why the Macroverse works, because each one fulfills their part. Many times these civilizations grow so much that they eventually give rise to their own gods, meaning a mortal who reaches divine status. In this case, the Kami-samas. These are the gods at the lowest level of the divine hierarchy. They're basically the ones who can move between the physical universe and the spiritual one. Not all civilizations are capable of elevating a human to the status of a god, but those that can definitely receive special attention from the Pantheon. The role of a kami-sama is to act as a god, offering solutions to crises on a global scale, and for that reason, some of them possess great powers, not necessarily destructive power, but the power to cause massive change. The kami of Earth, for example, has the power to create Dragon Balls, and if you think about it, the Dragon Balls could be used to end long periods of drought, or stop torrential floods, prevent earthquakes, and even resurrect a huge number of people. But in order for that to happen, a human must first climb Korin's tower to prove they are worthy, just like Goku did back in classic Dragon Ball. And don't forget, Goku was invited to become the new god of Earth after he trained with Kami. Bringing it a little closer to our own reality, it's as if Kami were Jesus, the Kaioshins were the Christian God, and Master Karin were the Pope. So, okay, we already know that the Kaioshins assist civilizations so they can thrive, and that some of them prosper so much that certain mortals reach divine status. But then, what happens to the civilizations that don't prosper? Well, in that case, those civilizations receive a rather unpleasant visit from the Pantheon's garbage collectors, also known as the gods of destruction. And no, calling the gods of destruction garbage collectors isn't an exaggeration. That's literally their role, to make room for the new, even if that means wiping out entire civilizations. The duty of a god of destruction is exactly that, and it became crystal clear in the Dragon Ball Super manga, where Beerus tries to teach Vegeta that destruction must be accepted as a fundamental force, not something evil that must be stopped. The power of a god of destruction is so colossal that their main weapon, the Hakai, erases absolutely everything from existence. Meaning, if a soul gets erased by Hakai, it's because the god of destruction believes that soul is toxic even for the spiritual plane. It's basically saying, not even hell wants this guy, and that's why the Hakai is used, because that whole thing went so wrong, it doesn't even deserve a second chance. Of course, in terms of sheer power, the gods of destruction are much stronger than the Kaioshins, but in the divine hierarchy, there's no difference between them. They're equally important for the functioning of the universe, which is why the life of one is tied to the life of the other. But it's worth remembering that unlike the Kaioshins, the gods of destruction aren't born gods. They start out as mortals who achieve divine status and go through a special ritual and training to become a god of destruction. Still, the universe is far too big to be overseen by just a single god of creation and a god of destruction. That's why there are the Kaio gods, or cardinal Kaios. Currently, Universe 7 has 4 of these gods, the East, West, North and South Kaios, hence the name Cardinal Kaios. And their role is simple, to observe. They have a pair of antennas that let them communicate with almost any civilization in the universe. But don't confuse that with omniscience or omnipresence. They have flaws too, and they definitely can't monitor multiple places at once. And now, here's where things jump to a whole other level. Because everything I've said so far applies to just one universe. Meanwhile, there are currently 12 universes. That means each of those 12 universes has its own god of destruction, its own Kaioshin, its own cardinal Kaios, and so on. But there's one god who stands above all the universes, the Grand Zeno. Zeno is basically a baby with the power to erase absolutely anything, and I mean anything, even the entire multiverse if he feels like it. In the Dragon Ball Super manga, during the Goku Black arc, the Kaioshin himself told Goku that Zeno is completely indestructible. It's impossible to kill him, so even if Zamasu destroyed the entire universe, Zeno would still exist. But because he's a baby with no sense of responsibility, He's assisted by the Grand Priest, the highest-ranking angel in the entire multiverse. The Grand Priest basically acts as the brain behind Zeno, and according to Whis, he's among the 5 most powerful beings in the whole multiverse. The Grand Priest, in turn, is responsible for sending his children, who are also angels, to assist the gods of destruction, offering whatever is needed to help them keep the universe in balance. But is Zeno the supreme entity behind the entire Dragon Ball macroverse? Well, according to Zuno-sama, no. According to Zuno, the Super Dragon Balls were created by a dragon god named Zalama. And let's be real, the power of Super Shenron was the only thing capable of undoing something that Zeno himself had done. And interestingly, at the end of the Tournament of Power, when Super Shenron appeared, even Zeno stood up, as if he too recognized he had to show respect to the entity created by the dragon god Zalama. No one knows exactly what Zalama looks like, but some theories suggest he's actually the first Namekian. After all, every Namekian who can create Dragon Balls belongs to a specific bloodline called the Dragon Clan, and Zalama was called a dragon god by Zuno. So it's possible that all gods were created by Zalama after he made his very first wish to the Super Shenron, maybe realizing that a macroverse with only one species was doomed to extinction. And that's why he created this divine pantheon and enabled the existence of different universes with different gods and different cultures. Subscribe.